Everybody, this is Missy.
Hi.
You didn't see the update. This is my best friend. We didn't wear our accessorizing shirts today, but
yeah.
let the record be fun. And she is a middle school language arts instructor. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself. We're going to be going through her notes on page 25 and then doing some exercises that follow that.
All right. So, like Mindy said, I've been teaching middle school language arts for 13 years now, and about 6 years when no, 7, 8, whenever. Whenever I went back to get my master's in English, we had to pick our area of focus for research, and I was from the viewpoint very much that I didn't want it to just be something that was based in what I already enjoyed. It was what's the thing that I'm worst at or that I'm not doing the best job of. And for a writing teacher, that was feedback, where I was just kind of continuing this cycle of feedback that I thought this is what language arts teachers do. They mark up papers, they tell you what you're doing wrong, they give you the grade, and they put all sorts of markings on it. And so I really dug deep into feedback to improve myself in that area. And then as Mindy and I talked as she was doing yoga teacher training, we kind of found our common ground in how feedback could be more helpful for yoga teachers as well. So this is on page 25, you find kind of the hit list of what we found in the research that transferred over in feedback practices that promote growth and don't do harm, because first do no harm is kind of the theme of feedback. So we're just going to go through some of these things really quick and then really put it into action, because that's the only way, we learn by doing. So the first thing, especially since your guys' feedback is all going to be verbal audio feedback when you're giving to people, you've got to focus on one major issue at a time. So you really have to analyze your students and see what is the biggest thing preventing their success and what can you focus on, because otherwise, and as you'll see with me, I am not a yogi by any, I think of myself as an eternal beginner level yoga student forever and ever. It's not going to get beyond that stage for me probably, just because of the other activities that I invest more time in my body that are counterbalancing any success I might have with yoga. And so you really got to prioritize what is the biggest barrier to success with your student. And it's not about finding the perfect expression of the pose. It's first of all, safety is what should be the first priority. But then also what's the major thing that they can do, because they have to be able to process it and fix that thing before they can move on to the minor issues. So really being able to break down your poses and just seeing what's the biggest thing that they need for success at that is important, and master that huge thing before you move on to anything else. Sideways. So what we'll do today is kind of ask you to break down a pose into all of those component parts so that we can focus on the big issues instead of the smaller things. Second thing, when you're dealing with verbal feedback and your people are listening, you have to keep it brief. Keep your words consistent. Always in language. If a student comes to your class, you should be working with that same vocabulary set that they know. This is not the time to be flowery with your words or to use things. They might sound pretty, but that might not be the best way to give feedback. So you want to be able to use consistent phrasing and keep it as short as possible so that their brain can process it in the moment, and so that they know each time the transfer of postures, use consistent language. If you're telling them to do something with their hips, yeah, push your big toes or something like that. It should transfer into any other pose where you're having them do it. Do not word it differently in a different posture. Make sure that it transfers on to everything you're asking them to do, that you're saying it the same way each time. And keep them informed. If there is specialized vocabulary that you expect your students to know for your class, you've got to teach them the vocabulary first. You've got to demonstrate it, and you've got to consistently reinforce it every time you're asking them to apply that. You know, overly generalized statements, number 3. I see that a lot of times with positive reinforcement. You know, we want to use feedback as the path to improvement. So that means it needs to be as specific as possible. A good job is something you tend to want to go to as positive reinforcement, but as a method of feedback, it's really kind of useless in a sense. So if you do want to give them a good job, make it a more specific compliment. Tell them what they're doing a good job of doing in that specific pose so that they know that they can do that. So like if I have been struggling with a certain skill in a certain pose and you want to tell me that I'm doing a good job of it this time, then say good job with keeping your continuing to push your big toes, and then I'll remember, oh, I can do that, I'm good at that, I can move it into the next one. And then when we're on a different posture, you can remind your student again that like this is another one where we're going to be pushing our big toes in, so that they know exactly, oh yeah, I did it last time, I can do that again even though this is a different context for that movement. And yes, especially with that positive reinforcement, transfer is what you want. You want to foster that independence. So if you're giving them positive feedback, you want to make sure that it's something that allows them to remember that they can do this in one pose so they can apply it to the next one. So as specific as possible with what movements they're doing and how they're doing them.
And guys, as we're going through this, there are questions that are bubbling up.
Yeah, just stop. Number 4 was the most important one for me and the one I would stress the most. Our reaction to feedback, our need to give feedback a lot of times focuses on error correction, especially with you guys and you're dealing with the human body. You know, you're very concerned with if someone's going to hurt themselves and fixing those issues. But if you're only fixing on everything that's wrong, that can create that defeatist mindset in your student pretty quickly, and like, I just can't do this, you know, and then you've kind of stopped even the ability of growth. And how I present this when I talk to English teachers is feedback is not about showing how much you know. And a lot of people get confused with that when they get into excessive error correction. Like a lot of writing teachers think that they have to mark every single error in a paper. That doesn't do anything for your student other than prove that you know how to fix those errors, but it really doesn't help them move forward other than to say, oh, I'm really bad at writing. Like I have a lot of errors. So you want to think about what's your goal. Our goal, hopefully with feedback, is to promote growth. And so you want to use positive statements, positive language when you can. So instead of the no, 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 don't do that, tell them what to do instead. So push your big toes in positive language, and then also just one step at a time. Don't tell them everything they're doing wrong. If there's something that's harmful, you know, you can explain why you need to do this so that it doesn't hurt your back, or so that it doesn't put pressure here. But you don't want to just attack it with that list of wrong things. You know, as we're demonstrating and working on stuff with me, I can pretty much guarantee whatever posture you're going to put me in, there'll be a list of things that are wrong. If you give me that full list of everything that's wrong, I'm never going to want to work on that posture again. I want to be able to find those little steps of where I can grow and what I can do to eventually master it someday. And that might just be dealing with like the lower part of my body and not the upper half in a certain pose. If I can at least master part of it, then I'm on that path toward growth. But I'm going to be very defeated if it's just all about what I'm doing wrong. And then the last thing is just something to keep in mind for us and for our students is feedback is about purpose versus execution. You should always make sure your students know their clear purpose for what they're doing in any posture, in any sequence, anything at all. What is their purpose for doing it? And as a teacher, you need to know your purpose for having them do it as well. And then your feedback centers on that. How well are they achieving the purpose? Not that it's perfection, but like, are they getting to the purpose that you have for it and their purpose for themselves? It's going to look a little different for everyone, that purpose. And if you're not on the same page as far as purpose goes, then it's really hard to give effective feedback because, you know, they might not know what the purpose is. So that's going to make the execution different for everyone. Okay.
Doing okay? Rock and roll. Keep going. Okay. So we're gonna go through an exercise, and then we'll come back, and then I'm gonna flesh out some more points, more specific to what we're doing, how we see this in practice, how we see these objectives practice. So going into the exercise, we're going to, as a team, I'm going to pick the pose for you. You alone are going to brainstorm the various components of this posture. And then we're going to, again, individually list the common barriers to success, and then we're going to come through and we're going to talk about those as we have Missy actually put this into practice and have her demonstrate. So we started working on chaturanga. You saw it visually. She knows the words. So this is very important that we know this specific to the sequence because we do it a lot. So we need to understand if we do have somebody that's, you know, feels very uncomfortable with this posture versus somebody that feels like they know it like the back of their hand, we need to be able to understand how to serve both of those in the same shared space, because we don't really have this filtering system within the class. So this is your posture. I want you to take about 5 minutes and then just brainstorm what are the different physical components of this posture. What are the different checkpoints?
Like, I already have to take my shirt off. I'm getting sweaty.
No, just the chaturanga posture. Yeah, just the low push-up position. Are you in go mode?
You're gonna make me use my arms. I'm gonna.
Just the brainstorming, the components, just the laundry list of things that are involved in this posture. So after brainstorming, I want you to think about why wouldn't somebody be able to do some part of this? Why wouldn't somebody be able to push their feet? Why wouldn't somebody be able to, whatever your list is, what would be barriers to success with that? Think about the cues that you give. You can actually script it out. What do you say? Because we're going to have to cue this with her. So then, number 4, prioritize these cues. Prioritize this checklist. Knowing that there are so many components, what are the first things that you want to make sure get across? So you're saying without cueing all of this, what would you do? What is your priority? Okay, with our lists? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're all gonna have an opportunity to cue, and then just as if we were in a research lab, you're going to give her 3 cues. You are limited to 3 cues. From there, you're going to observe what you see. So if you look down, just make notes about what you're you're observing in her execution of this, what you're observing in terms of any sort of physical limitations. And then we're going to go to the next person. We're just going to give everybody a chance to do that thing. Okay, so you're not intervening. Once you've given the 3 cues, no supplemental cues. Okay. So we'll start here and then we'll just go around. Carla?
Am I leaving this on or can I take this off? Or
I'll hold it. No, I'm going to have you start from, we'll have you start from plank position. Three cues.
Tailbone up, ribs up.
That's 2.
Shoulders back.
Okay, so observe, make some notes. What you see, how she's doing in a posture. Missy, go ahead and relax. Her execution versus your intention. Okay.
no, that's okay.
I should have planned like she's the
Okay. That's the reality of being in class, right?
Mindy chose the pose, so she
I'm altogether responsible.
Oh, my irons.
Okay, so you made notes about what you saw, what worked, what didn't work. Okay, Heather, whenever you're ready, you're up. From plank.
Tuck your ribs up. Shoulders over wrists. There's no way to do it in 3. Hold that for about 5 more minutes. Bend your elbows.
Relax. Okay. Gloria, then Allie. Go ahead.
Okay, coming into plank. Bring your shoulders forward. A little bit forward of your wrist. Roll your shoulders open.
2.
Bring your elbows in. You're Korean chaturanga, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we can see her back for a second. This is just your starting position. I'm not focused on you getting her through any sort of transition. You want her to arrive at chaturanga. That's the focal point, is to make sure that she's there. From plank. Ready? Okay.
So, always when you're on the spot. Wrap your lower ribs up. Pull your shoulders slightly past your wrists and squeeze your elbows inside to a 90 degree.
Relax. Okay, so make your notes. What did we observe?
Not at all.
It's hard, okay? So let's go back through this. What were, how to observe? Look at 1B. Is the student at risk? What are the risks of this posture? Blowing out the rotator cuffs. What else?
Wrists,
Yep, pressure on the wrists. What else?
neck issues,
Aha,
low back,
low back,
arm strength,
limited arm strength,
abdominal awareness.
abdominal awareness, okay. Strength. Let's stay focused on the safety issues. Because if somebody lacks, what was the one before abdominal strength? Arm strength. So if somebody just lacks that, they just don't have it. It's going to put them at risk. We need to build that, but just pure risk factor, somebody jumping into this. Shoulders, wrists, compression in the neck if they're looking up, compression in the low back if they're dumping. The lower body's pretty safe here. I think. Okay, so we have those safety issues. Order of priority with the safety issues. How would you rank those? Rotator cuff. Okay. Next.
Isn't it gonna depend a little bit on the person?
For sure.
So it's kind of hard to organize that according to everybody.
Generally speaking, what would be the greatest risk?
What is it, the shoulders?
The rotator cuffs. Yeah.
Or the back?
Let's go through. You guys tell me what just you individually, how you would organize it. Give yourself a minute, make a list, and then we're gonna see if we can come to some sort of consensus.
For me, the shoulders about the rest of it is a lot, but I know a lot of my students have trouble with their wrists. The wrists hurt. They're just beginning and they don't know how to
Use their hands.
use their hands. That's a big problem. for that level. And then again, I'd say core is their lower back.
Let's go in reverse order. So we had 4 points, right? Rotator cuff, wrist, low back. Was there a neck? Rotator cuff, low back, neck, wrists. Order of priority, Allie, for you?
From 1 to 4,
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably go rotator cuff, low back, wrist, neck.
Okay. Gloria, what would you say?
I think I agree with Ally for the most part. Yeah, depending on the person.
Rotator cuff, low back, wrist, neck. Okay. Heather, what would you say?
Rotator cuff, wrist, low back.
I'd say rotator cuff, neck, low back, wrist.
Sorry, one more time.
Rotator cuff, neck, low back, wrist.
Sorry, where's my brain? Rotator cuff, neck, second. Low back was third. Wrist were last. Okay, so let's think about this. What is the most vulnerable of these and why?
Pressure, and it's so easy to have them in the wrong place, not stacked.
So Missy, can you come into this posture for us? Come into plank.
Wouldn't it be your wrist because then you have the most compression into the wrist?
Exactly.
Weight.
So even before we add weight, the wrists are at risk, right? So we know that we need to address that. Okay, so then what happens? Missy, bend your elbows into your belly button, as low as hold. Okay, so do we see what just happened with the shoulders? Okay, so this is the hardest part to control. This is going to have the most risk because of the dumping into gravity. The tailbone, the low back, and then the neck are going to be in response to this giving up. So those are going to be secondary to these things. You on board with that? This is number 1 because we have the body weight before anything else is added on. People feel it here, but this is something that's going to get aggravated over time. So
Coming down to your knees for pressure.
it takes some of the weight out of it. So how do we address issues in the wrist and the rotator cuff? We know that this is the cause, this is the effect, low back and the neck are the effect. So what do we need to reorganize in order to remove the barriers to success, in order to make sure that the student is the safest? Go ahead, just brainstorm by yourself and then we'll come into a group again. Yes, you haven't fun yet? So tired. So our question is, how do we remove the risk to the wrists? How do we remove risk to the shoulders, to the rotator cuffs? We're going to cue it one more time. So think of 3 cues. You can establish the starting position for her however you'd like. You can have her start from standing. You can have her start from her belly. That's not one of the cues. You set up the starting position and then you have 3 cues. Okay? So we'll zigzag. Gloria, Heather, Allie, Carla. Need more time, Gloria? Or do you? Yeah, take a minute. Think about your cues. Organize them accordingly. Think about your starting position. Ready? Okay. Missy, are you ready?
All right, starting in plank. Bring your down to the mat.
1,
Press into your index finger. And pull up through your ribs. Elbow down.
okay, pull up through the ribs.
Pull up through the ribs.
And that vocabulary doesn't mean anything.
So that's
to me.
the
And so,
feedback
like,
right
you
there.
guys kept saying that, and it had no frame of
And I was,
reference.
when you were cueing that this week, and you said the middle of your back should be the highest, that made no sense to me.
Mhm.
Because I thought, the middle of my back, my ribs are here, and the middle of my back is lower. So that cue was, I was like,
Mhm.
that.
We'll talk about that when we go through the thing, okay? Then if knowing that, referencing your experience, do you think that's going to be effective for her? Would you
Well,
want to?
I didn't say the middle of the back, so.
So do you
that
think,
would-
so you,
So what would be?
okay, so think about that. What would you want the third cue to be? Knowing that the feedback from her is saying she's not understanding how to execute that, how to represent that physically. Okay, Heather, batter up. Okay.
You can start, I think you're gonna dock me. No, you can start in plank on your knees. Push into your thumbs and index fingers. Bring your shoulders ahead of your wrists. Draw your elbows together. You can relax.
Were those cues successful?
No.
Okay. Based on what feedback she was giving you, what worked, what didn't? And her execution of the posture.
Well, I got the elbow part right.
Okay.
The elbows worked. The
Missy, did you understand what she was asking of you?
On the elbows, yes, but when you guys are talking shoulders, I am confused on whether it's like what I think of as my shoulders or like what you guys think of as shoulders. And so when you guys say bring them forward, I don't know if you're telling me to like hunch up
what did you want
I was
from that?
meaning shoulder heads. This is what I would call shoulder heads. Is that right?
I don't know. That's what
No,
I was
I
trying to
made
do.
that
Yeah,
up.
that's
Like,
what I was
okay,
trying to do.
this part right here is what I would call my shoulder.
I
Yeah,
refer
that's a
to the
good point.
deltoids as the shoulder head here,
There. Okay.
where the shoulder. This
Yeah.
I would reference this where the arm comes into the trunk as the shoulder head.
But yeah, I puzzled over that too, because I have a hard time communicating that to my
Yeah.
students. And I don't know if you, sometimes I thought about bringing your thighs forward, and that brings your shoulders forward. And I don't know if that's.
Let me ask, what do you actually want?
See, my notion is that when you're bending your elbows, your arms should be straight up and down. Is that correct?
Clarify for me where would your ideal position be with the shoulders? Can I jump in for a second? Okay, so where do you want my shoulders? Heather, come physically put me into position.
Okay, well, the only reason why I said that is because you making me come when we're doing chaturanga, and you making me come, looking ahead and coming this direction with my body has helped me not have pain here. So all I was doing was trying to get this a little bit ahead. That's probably did it wrong. Because I think normally I would cue shoulders over wrists, right?
But then when you bend your elbows, your arms straight up and down. Maybe that's.
So
When you come down into low, you start there, bend your elbows down. You're fine because you pull forward.
But you
But
want
I
the,
don't do that.
but you want the 90 degree, you want them to come forward.
Right.
it's a curve. It's not straight up and down. When we think of push-ups, we think down up. When we're in the proper technique. So again, maybe we need to have a separate conversation of what the actual execution is. We'll get into that a little bit more. So be careful, guys, because when we say shoulders forward, this is what happens. This is the biggest recipe for disaster in the shoulder joint. Okay. So what you're saying when you say shoulders forward, do you want the torso to come with it, or you just want the shoulder, this part of the body?
No, I'm saying torso with it and saying that general direction.
Okay, okay. So now I understand what you guys are asking. Okay. So make notes. Allie, go ahead. You can start in any position, 3 cues. Focused on the safety of the wrist, focus on the safety of the shoulders. Safety.
Hold on.
So listen to the space between the shoulder blades. Press down into your finger pads and squeeze your elbows into your sides at an
Okay, make notes. So are her shoulders in a safe and sustainable position?
No.
No. Okay. Carla? Take a breath. 'Cause I need to- But we're getting closer. Definitely getting closer.
Okay, come into a knee plank. Bring your tailbone up. Look forward. Bring your elbows, squeeze your elbows into your rib cage at a 90-degree angle. Chin the ribs up.
Okay. So what did you see?
Stretching.
Shoulders. Safe or unsafe? Safe. Super unsafe. Okay. So you're living
dangerous, yeah.
Okay, let's back up. So why is that happening? This is just the process of investigation.
She need to rub her shoulders back.
What is the barrier to success with that?
Wrap your shoulders down and back.
What is the barrier to success with that? Why would somebody be unable to do that? Strength, where?
Arms and shoulders.
Back,
Your trunk, your shoulders,
Okay.
your upper back.
It's these muscles that pull down and in here. So this is why those muscles poop out, and then we get all of this here. These muscles poop out, and then what happens? The wrist gets fucked up. Okay, so Missy, can you let's try this again. Okay, so start on your knees. So order of priority here, we need to make sure that the wrists are in a good position. So if we're gonna take a three-dimensional view, what do we see to begin with? Okay, stand up, walk around. Is you okay there for 5 breaths? Is her placement correct?
Her left hand is gonna turn, isn't it?
You could spread her fingers wide.
Why is that? Look, don't just
Don't
just
change
look,
it.
just
Okay.
look. Just observe.
So her left wrist is kind of going inward.
Missy, what hand do you write with?
Right.
What side's gonna be weaker? Left. What do we see the compensation in? The dominant or the non-dominant side?
Dominant. There's more pressure going on to her down this side, right?
I feel like there's more pressure on the left though. It looks more on the right.
Okay, so this is starting to come up. Okay, what else do we see? Are her hands in the right place? Are the bones organized correctly? Just in the arms and the wrists.
So index fingers need to be more forward and fingers need to be
She's
more
internally rotating. Why? Go ahead and
And
relax.
fan
once
out.
again. Why is she internally rotating?
Probably because our shoulders naturally sometimes come forward a little bit more, so reassessing to like, I don't know.
No, you're on the right path. What do we see in bodybuilders? What do we see in weightlifters? This, right? So the more that we rely on this here, the less of that rotating action in the shoulder blades we're accessing. Then this is overpowering that positioning. This is weak and just going wherever you're telling it to go because it doesn't have any muscles to resist. So all of this internal rotation is happening. So before she even starts to try to come into any position, her position needs to be correct. Okay? We need to take care of the joints. You need to look at the actual joints that we're working with and making sure that they're organized properly. So when she's coming into it from there, it's not an unwilling situation. She just isn't set up for success. Okay? So, Missy, one more time.
Just like my usual.
Just
without
starting,
having-
nope, not even coming into the position. So just the starting position, what do we need to do? Our wrists are the priority. This is the number one safety issue.
This creases line up with the front of the neck.
So, from her angle, she might think it looks okay.
Yeah.
What would you tell her to do? You know more than she does at this point.
Spread her fingers wide.
Number one, spread your fingers.
Index finger shines forward.
Bring your middle finger forward. Okay, so based on the shoulders, we need to look at the lines of the wrist. She's fairly neutral here. If you see a lot of pressure here, you can have them turn up, but don't have them go crazy with it. I'm not super fixed on whether it's the first or the second, just making sure that the wrists are straight with the front of the mat. Okay, so from here, what's the third cue? Just to take care of the wrists.
Rest on, like, into the finger pads and the palms, going between the
Lisa,
shoulders.
do you know what you mean by finger pads?
The tips?
I would refer to this as a finger pad. But
I was thinking
you think
tips.
tips?
I think tips.
I think tips. When you say finger
Look
pads,
at
I do
that.
my tips, yeah.
Yeah. Look at that, look at the little pads.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
think first knuckles.
Like if you said knuckles, that's when I do
okay.
that.
I
I think first knuckles and then finger pads. So like, I'm telling people to go down first knuckles, finger pads.
Okay. So Missy, push down your finger pads. What do you see happening? Your shoulders went up. Okay. Just stay with this part of the body. That feedback. You tips. Okay. We do see that. What's happening here? Palms pumping up. Palms are pumping up.
So you're
Okay.
pushing the mouth,
So it's the mountains.
this weird thing.
The palm.
The under knuckles.
Yeah, just go ahead and relax for a second. You guys know my cue, the first knuckle. This is why. This gets them out of that position where this is rolling out. This is maintaining that point of contact because this is the compensation. We know that when this is disconnecting, this is where it's headed. We're preventing that from happening. If they stay glued, nothing's going anywhere else. Yes.
I've also heard this with a triangle, here, here.
It depends. If you've gone over that vocabulary with the students and that they understand how to access that, 100%. I say shoulder packing in my classes, but I'm good about introducing that vocabulary. If we're doing arm balances, it's the quickest cue. Shoulder pack, shoulder pack, shoulder pack. But you got to introduce it. Okay? So we see, thank you, Missy, we see that there's a lot of stuff going on. So we need to understand how to get them into a position, number one, that we're removing all safety barriers, number two, that she feels like she understands what's going on, and three, we're giving her place that's appropriate for where she's at, but also that she feels like she's participating and is able to progress. Okay? So this is what we're going to do for hopefully most of the postures today, is understanding what the safety issues are and understanding how to break them down in usable ways. So come back. Sorry guys, I put oil on this morning and it did not absorb, so just step lightly. I'm trying to catch it all, but okay. So what I want to talk about as it relates to what Missy is doing is, if you go to page 28, student-focused instruction. I asked you about this in the observation map. See, hear, do. So this is something I'm very, very, very firm on because it stays focused on the student. It's not about what you want to say, it's about what the student needs to hear. This is a practice that I've adopted from teaching in other languages. So, you know, if I'm having a cue in Spanish, which I have to do on, you know, at a very minimal level, I know how to say push your hands down, pull your chest forward, right? If you stay in these very basic building blocks that we all can understand and relate to, you're making sure that you're staying in the student's experience. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff in the yoga world, spirals and wraps, and, you know, then you get into the really flowery stuff of thinking about bandhas and, you know, all this stuff that we kind of hear and it passes through in the ether, but we really aren't connecting it to anything useful, and that's not going to benefit the student. Again, is what she's talking about, showing what you know rather than being there for the student and giving them the information that they need. So see, hear, do. Hi, welcome. You're front and center. No, just kidding.
There.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry guys, no. Not see here, do. Action, body part, direction. Okay, that's what we talked about. Action, push or pull, body part, establish it. One body part, direction. Up, down, using markers in the room. Okay, being as obvious and literal with your direction as you can. We'll do this a little bit more.
And I would just say, just from last time, they were putting me in warrior 2, just the bottom, just the legs, not the top. We never got to the top. But even once I got into the successful cue levels of the language I could understand, I can I've taken that home with me now as I'm practicing at home. So you're talking about someone who lives in the country in a rural. I'm not in yoga classes. You know, I'm just go home practice when I'm doing it. But just like the basic simplified language of like try to angle your knee over your second toe was the most helpful feedback I received in that position. Period. The entire time. That stuck with me because it was basic body part direction.
So when we're, you know, we practiced Ashtanga together for many, many, many months, and it still is rooted in keeping the most fundamental parts of language. Push your big toes down, pull your knees open. It's about what you need to hear. Where you take it from there is up to you. But my job is to guide you into those very obvious checkpoints so that you can advocate for yourself. I'm not doing it for you. You can understand how to do it for yourself. Okay. See, hear, do. I'm going to take a little bit of a departure here. See, hear, do. When you are introducing new information, students use their eyes first, they use their ears second, then they are able to execute third. So if we are trying to get somebody to do something, don't make them hang, this is practical, don't make them hang out in the posture, getting tired, they're not focused on you. Let them see you first. Just purely let them be in their eyes. Then let them hear the cues. You can do it again, so they have the visual, then the oral, then you can do it together. So as a practical way of introducing new information. Okay. So I want to do another short activity. This ties into purpose versus execution. Make sure students have a clear purpose for what they're doing at all times. So when you say engage your core, I hear this in a lot of classes, I hear this in a lot of different disciplines. What are you actually asking for? In this little box, I want you to make notes. What do you actually mean when you say that? What do you want? What is your objective with that? Put those eyeballs back in your head, Heather. So what do we mean when we say that?
Some people that pull their spectral belly button toward their spine. Don't line their spine.
Why?
So
What is
that's,
the objective of that?
so their belly's not hanging low, making them go back to the job.
Okay. So what is their lower back hanging down?
They hurt their low back. So it encourages proper alignment.
They protect their lower back when they do that. Your elbow goes down. Your glutes.
I mean, it depends on what you are soliciting when you ask this. A lot of people have different interpretations of that. Okay, so one interpretation is pull your belly button back. Another interpretation is tuck your tailbone. What's another interpretation of this?
Squeeze your glutes.
Squeeze your butt. What else?
Neutral spine, so that's tailbone too, tailbone down and your flat back.
So we have
more upright too.
I was just
Tightening.
protect your spine.
the objective is to protect the spine. Okay. So we can see here that we aren't all on the same page. We are using this expression that doesn't have any shared meaning. So understanding what is if you use this, I actively discourage people from using this because I think that students, as we see even as teachers, we don't have a shared experience related to this. Number one, it encourages squeezing, which isn't always appropriate. Number 2, it also encourages compression of the lungs, and students aren't able to access the majority of the capacity of the lungs is in the lower third. So when you compress that, you're shortening the capacity of the breath. You're sending them out of that rest and digest system and into the fight and flight system when they're breathing up here. And also it's taking away the organization of the body as a whole. So instead of saying, if we are in, of course we need to use the trunk of the body here when we're in chaturanga. What is another way that we can reach? So number 1, write an objective. Give me a specific objective for this expression. Engage your core. And then number 2, how is that attached to chaturanga? How can we actually elicit that meaning? How can we organize the student in such a way that they're still reaching that objective, but we're using more succinct vocabulary? Go on back in.
I feel the same way. About that pose. Exact same way. Feel your pain.
I write all the time, so I'm a hunter anyway, you know, and it's
Who's ready?
So I want to try something.
Please.
Okay. So you're on your knees. Because you said you didn't feel anything with pulling up through your ribs. What if you lift your lower back?
It's your cue.
You
Tell
know,
me.
I think that's maybe helpful.
For what objective? What is your objective in doing that?
To protect the lower back.
How?
And to kind of engages your core. So you're not swaying into your back, you know, and the ribs do come up a little bit. She does that.
So instead of saying engage your core, you would say, tell me again.
I said lift your lower back.
Lift your lower back. Okay. So it gets them going in the direction away from the compensation.
Right.
That's good. Yeah.
well, and it was helpful too because I didn't just suck in my stomach. Like if you would have told me to engage my core, I just would have stayed in the same spot but sucked in.
That's what, in my experience, when people hear engage your core, it's just squeeze your abs.
Yeah.
And that's a very superficial muscular action.
I always think to be able to find. I don't know if that connects at all.
That just still makes me suck in, but that's
Yeah. So your objective with using the expression, what's the objective?
So if I'm trying to get them out of their low back, rather than able to climb, instead of saying engage or
For what purpose? What is the objective?
protect the low back.
Protect the low back, okay? Majority of the time we're doing this so that they aren't dumping, right? They're not doing this. Okay? So we're trying to, the objective is to protect the low back. So give her a cue that helps her protect your low back in this position.
Push your hip bones forward. Grab your low ribs.
Okay? So just with that, if we're just focused on engage the core, instead of this esoteric cue, you get an actionable thing. Push your hips forward, okay? Missy, what did you feel with that?
like
Just the action of moving your hips. Would you say move? Push your hips forward.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
What do you feel in the
More like action there, I guess.
So it's a more involved posture at that point. Okay, she's still level, she's still not dumping into her low back, but now we have an actionable thing to work with. Okay, ready? What's the objective?
Check the lower back.
Okay.
Pop up your spine.
Missy, what do you feel?
My Like a turtle?
Okay,
Can you use a lot of turtle shells?
yeah, okay. And so
So
why,
breathe into your backside,
yeah, why do we want that shape?
because it automatically engages your core.
Did you feel any squeezing?
In my neck, like up here.
You put it in alignment to protect it.
Right. So when we breathe up, we get everything puffed out here. We have more pieces that are carrying themselves rather than everything dumping into the low back. So this becomes a self-sustaining position at that point, a self-sustaining unit. Okay, Carla?
Rest for a second, so I've got to
So, and how is that when you're bringing, what did you say, puff up your
backside,
backside,
breathe into your
puff
backside.
up?
Turtle shell.
Puff
Yeah.
up, okay. So is that, that's what it felt like.
It should be, chaturanga should be, that should be the framework. And then going through, when you come through in Bhujangasana, it should be cows. Wait, which one's which? I
Yeah,
always get
you
it.
got it right.
Cat's round.
I did the same thing.
So yeah, chaturanga should be cat frame.
Yeah,
Cat?
you're right, Kat.
Chaturanga should be cat frame. Bhujangasana should be cow frame.
So you could say round your spine.
Sure.
Round like a cat's.
Whatever the transferred language is that you
Yeah.
use with cat cow would be the exact same
And then set them up
phrasing you
back.
want to use.
So every articulation of the spine is on that framework. Extension, flexion, extension,
But you
flexion.
tilt yourself on forward. Do you want cat?
Round your spine.
Right.
Could you say lift your low back, lift your ribs?
So let me just show you guys that in action. If we are cat cow here, same thing. If I just take it out here, I'm still round. Come through, it's still the same extension. It's the same, right? Same articulation. Okay? You're just adding more muscle to it. So there, make a note of that. That's your regression. Okay, this, second. So, Carla, shoot.
Lift your low back. Oh, no, wait. Lift, press your hips forward, raise your hips.
Okay, 1 cue. So your objective in having her, oh, sorry, say it again. What was your cue?
Oh, I only get one? Oh. I had two. I had two.
What is your objective? What would be the purpose of using the expression engager for? Why would you be inclined to say that?
That's fine.
So if you were to use the expression engager, we're just trying to swap it
I
out.
know.
So why would you say that? Why would one say that?
So I don't want their lower stomach sagging down. I want their back. Can you say arch your back?
Sure. See what happens. This is
Because
this is
they're
the
not-
act of feedback, right? You say it, is it working? Okay. If not, I need to adjust. If it is, boom, nailed it, right? So this is the practice.
They want her low back up, but I also want her ribs up, so what's one thing to say for that?
I don't think you want the low back up.
No?
What do you mean by
So that it doesn't dip.
yes? Okay. So you don't mean the tailbone up. You mean the low back up. Okay.
Lengthen your spine from your neck to your tailbone.
So that's your feedback. How's it going? Miss, talk her through it. What are you experiencing?
I have a hard time with lengthen your spine because that happens in a lot of yoga classes, and I don't know what it like. What does it mean? You know, like I don't like. Am I trying to put my head out and be long,
Or
or
variables.
Exactly.
like am I trying? I don't know what. I guess I don't.
So relax for a second, guys. Take this note. What to do versus how to do it. Circle, how to do. How to do it.
Because lengthen your spine makes sense once you know how.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
I know, hearing it for the longest time.
What to do,
What are you talking about?
What to do versus how to do it. Your what to do is your objective. How to do it are the cues.
So what to do is lengthen your spine. How?
That's what I want. That's my objective. I'm trying to get her to lengthen her spine, but she doesn't. That's irrelevant language to her. So we as teachers have to explain how to do it. Now, teacher notes specific to the spine. What are the actions of the spine?
rounding,
Flexion, extension, lateral flexion and extension. They're separated, but they go together. Lateral flexion, lateral extension. What else? Rotation. What else? Traction. Traction is from a neutral position. So we need to make sure that we understand the nuance of the position. When we are in down dog, we are actually honoring the natural curves of the spine. We're just creating space in between the individual bones. That's traction. When we are in chaturanga, that's flexion. So flexion is a hollow shape here, up through the upper back. Okay. When we're in extension, it's going beyond the midpoint. So when she is lengthening the spine, that's putting her into a neutral position. That's not putting into her hollow position.
you said around the back or looking forward? Or is that two cues?
You know, I notice when I'm teaching, I can just look around the room. If I say, lengthen your spine, and nothing happens. It's just, okay, let's try this. You know, roll your shoulders back, press the.
I'm gonna try something.
Please.
I'm just curious how it's gonna transition to her body. Top of your tailbone.
What you
I
want?
don't know what visual means. Me.
I feel like it's just trying to get you to make a pelvic tilt.
Yeah,
Like it's just trying to get you to move.
I'm not trying to.
No, you're
I
not.
was saying
Like,
because I'm.
I feel like, and I've heard like.
And I would say, I don't know that that's actually what you want me to do. That's just what I would do in response to it. I don't know that it's right.
I think it was.
So that would be
Or the-
something,
I guess
Does that feel similar to the same idea as popping your top part of your back, popping your back out?
Scoop your tailbone under.
The way it looked ridiculous.
And
it reminded me of the pushing the hips forward.
that's correct.
Right. Part of it.
Correct. I feel like it's more trying to move that pelvic bone,
Right.
so that's forward.
Here's the general rule. If you're doing strength stuff, this is going to access more strength if you squeeze the butt under. So that tucking, if you are in a position, if you're in some sort of standing position where you should have neutral curves, the tailbone should point down, not under. Because what that's going to do is it's going to send the spine into a curved position. So she's saying that, you know, do we say in, as an warrior two, right? That's the big one, where some people say it, some people don't. If you encourage tailbone under, because a lot of what you're trying to do is an overcompensation. Teachers typically are trying to get people out of this, but they're not addressing why that's happening. So what needs to happen, rather than going all the way under, scooping, because this is a hollow position, this is a strength-based position, rather than neutral. So you're pulling your whole body out of alignment from the base here when you tuck. In this position, it's completely appropriate. If you're in chaturanga, get your tailbone under so it's not flailing back on you. Okay, so was that an effective cue based on the feedback?
She said it was similar to going forward. Like the
So
visual
you-
was backwards.
So you got out of it what you intended with that cue. Okay. Heather?
I would just say what Carla started with, which was to bring in the hips forward.
What did you want? And then Missy, talk it through.
That's exactly what I wanted.
Okay. Missy, what do you feel here?
what do I feel in my body, or how do I feel about the feedback?
What do you feel in your body, and then how do you feel about the feedback?
I feel like I'm squeezing my butt in more and engaging my lower back area better.
Okay, so we're getting into bigger muscle groups, right? Okay, good.
And I felt like it was just very easy to follow, just from I didn't question whether I was doing it right or not.
What was the cue again? Sorry.
Bring your hips forward.
Hips forward.
Okay. And then did you have something else to add about the feedback?
No, just that it was a straightforward, like, body part move direction, you know? I mean,
Okay. We're on the right path. We're starting to understand where the breakdowns are and how to address them in ways that are understandable. Missy, can you talk about unknowing, unwilling, and unable?
Can I ask one quick question while it's on the, it's related to position stuff. This happened in my class this morning. So we were doing a forward fold. And one of my students was doing this. So I said, drop your crown to the, she said, I can't do that, it hurts my lower back. I said, bend your knees more, but any idea why that would hurt? It's news to me that would hurt your neck. What's going on there,
It hurts her neck to tuck her chin, to drop her head down. A lot of tightness there. She's just really, really tight. And then,
But she said it hurt her lower back.
because the head, what she's doing here, she's taking weight out of the hips by counterbalancing. So she's changing the fulcrum point here. So when you do this, this is why dropping your head is kind of a checkpoint of whether or not people are actually using their hips, rather than, if you think about your body as a seesaw, this weight is coming forward so that these muscles don't have to pull back and up. When you start to drop in, sorry guys, I really put it back. So when you start to drop in, the head is so heavy that you have to use the hips to pull back. Now, if that strength isn't there, or if their hamstrings are really fighting them, then what they're going to do is they're going to drop here, but they're going to pull up here, and then it is going to pull back. We understand that about the fulcrum point, the leveraging of the weight. Okay, so their head is less heavy here, it's less pull and overall demand on the body than it is when the head is in. So that's how you check, right? That's my feedback from you guys, whether or not you're using your hips or not. If the head is forward, it's telling you that they're not using their hips and that they're staying in the low back.
So to correct that, what cues would I give?
Have them sit on the wall, do it from here. So that their weight is supported here, and then they can use their forearms as well. They can use a lot of things to help support the weight until their lower body is strong enough to carry the whole load.
Thank you.
And then also, if there is a lot of tightness, it might also be the actual pull here through the upper back. So that might be an independent issue. But in terms of
She was saying lower back.
yeah, that's set her up against the wall and then set her up on her arms. Okay.
Knowing, unable.
Yes.
That's why I want to check out.
Yeah. Can you use the mic again? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what page she has it on, but I don't even know how this works. The part with the unknowing, unwilling, unable. Where does she have that? Oh, well, it's on page 26, the assess. So as you're observing me and we're doing stuff, and observing students all over your class, because obviously everybody's going to react to what you said differently, as you said. Part of knowing what kind of feedback to give someone is to assess which category they fit into. So unknowing, I would consider myself as a yoga student in the unknowing category a lot. Like when I don't know if I'm doing it right, or I don't know what your vocabulary means, and so I'm just kind of guessing with my movements. A lot of times those are unknowing. So the fix for that are generally things like vocabulary, making sure you're using a shared vocabulary, making sure the purpose is clear, that the student knows exactly what you're trying to get them to do. An unknowing student usually just needs more clarification in any situation. And you'll know that they're unknowing if with talking that stuff out, then the problem can be fixed through changing the vocabulary or giving them that clear purpose. Beyond unknowing, so if once they know and they still can't do it or it's still not being executed properly, then you have to determine is this an unable or an unwilling. So the difference between those, an unable is like if there's a physical barrier, if there's something that just makes this pose physically impossible at this point in time, whether that's due to injury, strength, whatever it is, they are physically unable. And so then your feedback response as a teacher for an unable person is that's when you go to modifications, props, adjustments, those types of things. Unwilling is more, if it doesn't appear that there's some kind of physical like incapability, they're just not willing to do it for whatever reason. If it's, it won't modify, it won't, that's more of just, they're not willing to go into that pose. They're not ready for that pose mentally, even if there's not a physical barrier there. Then that's the time also to just figure out some kind of alternative that can still get them.
And from your experience, how do you deal with those three separate situations?
So when it comes to writing, an unknowing, that's a mini lesson. That's us like one-on-one, like feedback time where we go through, and we'll work on the example together, and then they'll put it to use, and we'll continue feedback with that until they can show me that they can do it. An unable is more like direct from start scratch thing that they, like this skill isn't there, so we have to go back to find like what skill we can start with, like a basic. And so their expression, I'm not going to expect the same thing from that kid as I am, in the general mass. An unwilling, so that's like our reluctant learners or whatever. Boy writers, man. I'm going to meet them where they are willing, where they are willing to show something. So, and that might be very far from what my purpose as a teacher is. But I'm going to try to meet them somewhere where we can get something that could potentially someday lead to a path forward. But I have to accept with an unwilling student that, we've got to start somewhere, and it might not be in this pose, and it might not ever be in that pose, but it's at least, getting them to do something with that point in time that involves movement, and hopefully something that mirrors the movement that everyone else is doing. That's not just having them sit there or lay down. Yeah, kind of.
For me, it's super important that you understand progressions and regressions and postures, because for me, the biggest failures in classrooms and studios and yoga classes, if you can't do this, just rest. That's
What do you mean regressions?
So Missy, come into a little plane. So this right here, I'm already seeing compensations, right? I'm not gonna have her go any further. So Missy, I'm gonna have you back your hips up, and then push the floor. So that right there is a regression. She's working where she's able to work, but it's not chaturanga. It's the stepping stones to get her there.
Yeah, because if they just opt out, rest, they're not actually getting any of the benefits at all, even if they didn't like modify it or attempt it.
Exactly, and not saying that they, you know, if you have an unwilling student, then that's the point where it's out of your hands. If you have an unknowing or an unable, that's a deficit of your planning. So that's on you. That's on you to create an environment where they're able to be successful in whatever. If they are unknowing or unable, it's the teacher's responsibility to create a space where they're able to be successful.
It's like when you say, like, maybe you stay here, maybe you try this, and maybe you go there.
Yeah, the progression of options or the regression back. The unwilling, unknowing and unable, those are like knowledge and skill based things. The unwilling is more like attitude based, and you can't change their attitude. You know, you can't change someone else's attitude. You can change their knowledge and their comfort and things like that.
So a great example of this is when you have them in chaturanga, and they're the people that are coming in for that workout. Yeah. And so they're doing 10
Push-ups.
Got them in one chaturanga. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, you can do.
That's unwilling. Yeah, I mean, that's unwilling to, yeah.
So when I had a video of someone that was unwilling, their skills were there. You know, that is an example. Like, so there was nothing
There's no
in
physical
that case
limitation.
that I could have done. That was not my responsibility. No amount of cheerleading would have overcome that.
That's where yoga kicks in.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the other challenge of the teacher is knowing where to draw that line.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it's not your practice. It's the students, it's student focused, it's student centered, and you are giving them the tools, you're creating them the circumstance and the situation, and then they have to walk through the door.
And, you know, giving your feedback to the person who's going to apply it and be receptive toward it. You know, if you're going to spend time next to an unwilling person, that's an exhausting effort for everyone because they're not willing to accept it, the feedback at that time. So that's a case where in the classroom, like, we call that like a hit and run type of student, you know, like you go over and you give a suggestion, like a feedback, something they can do, but then you're going to focus the more in-depth modifications and feedback on the students who are either unable or unknowing from an energy conservation point too.
Yeah, it's just practical. And at the same time, knowing not to take it personally. Right? Knowing what you did in preparation to create the appropriate circumstance, and that at that point, it's in their hands. That's when it is have ownership over their practice in both capacities. Enabling or empowering, but allowing. What's it?
It's that fly baby bird.
Mm-hmm.
Can't push buttons.
That off, it creates more resistance.
Well, yeah, if you really dig down with an unwilling student, you're gonna run into power struggles. I mean, like that's just asking, and then they'll, you know, they might change into the, well, I can't, you know, even if they aren't unable, that's the mindset that they will adopt in it. So it's not, it's, you know, and they might come in a different day with an entirely different attitude, and then you can work with them on that day. But if they're unwilling, it's not.
One of my favorite responses to watch. They go, and I go, good. And they just kind of look at me and go, huh? They don't know what to do.
But one of the things we do have a role in is giving that positive feedback. Sometimes that is enough to kind of get them in a good headspace, making them more willing to advocate for themselves. So what I want to do is you're going to practice cueing this for Missy one more time. You've seen it. You've seen her execution of it. You've experienced what works, what doesn't. So you're going to cue her one more time. She's going to be in a position for 5 breaths. Make sure that you know that, understanding her familiarity with this posture and her skill set with it, that you are setting up a sustainable position for her. And then you're going to give her one piece of positive feedback while she's in that hold. Okay? So
3 cues again.
3 cues, just 3 cues. And again, you can set her up in whatever starting position you want. 3 cues, 1 piece of positive feedback as she's in the posture. Let's zig and zag the other way. So Raylene, Allie, Carla, Gloria, Heather.
I'm going first.
Yes, ma'am.
So 3 cues, so we went around, that was just 1 cue, right?
So you can set her up standing, you can set her up tabletop, you can set her up low plank, high plank, whatever. And then 3 cues to get her into some expression of chaturanga, some workable form, 1 piece of positive feedback.
Set up in tabletop. Breathe into your spine. Breathe up into your spine. Tuck your chin one. Good job raising your back. It was okay. It wasn't the best.
So based on her execution of this, what feedback did that give you? Were they effective? Is she doing what you want? Is it workable?
The back is where I want it to be, where arms.
Okay. So knowing that she dumps into her shoulders, then we know that that would probably not be appropriate for today, right? Just understanding how to hold herself in this shape, getting all the different pieces organized. As my feedback for you, I think that that's a good starting point. Okay. Missy, take a breather. And Allie, whenever you're ready, any position. 3 cues, 1 piece of positive feedback. Everybody just looking around at each other.
Press down for your first knuckles. Wrap your hip bones forward. Squeeze your elbows to your hips.
3 more breaths.
We're working on thinning your low back.
2, 1, relax. Okay. Feedback, Missy?
On
The cues.
I liked the knuckles, that was helpful. What was the second one?
Push your hip bones forward.
Okay, you said wrap
Oh, yeah.
instead of push, and so I didn't know what wrap meant, so I just pushed. So like the wrap was the confusing part of me, because I'm like, am I supposed to like do something?
Alien math.
Yeah, I didn't. And I know wrap is a word that I hear a lot in yoga classes, and I never know what to do with it.
I didn't understand it for 12 years.
Yeah, I don't know what wrap means with any of my body parts. I don't like, unless like wrap your arms around yourself. It's the only context I know what wrap means. And so I pushed because I assumed that's what it was, but that's where as a student I'm confused whenever somebody uses the term wrap.
What was the positive feedback? Good job.
Like your low back.
I thought you said drop. Did you say drop?
No.
I
Like-
said bend your elbows. This is my third one.
But with the
Squeeze your
hips.
elbows.
With the
Yeah.
hips.
Oh, I
Didn't
thought
you
it was
say drop your
squeeze
hips?
in. I thought
Yeah.
it was
I said bend your elbows into your side.
So I understood, and then I saw that, and I was like, oh, that was
I keep your elbows to your side.
Bend your elbows to your side.
Okay, so I guess that's another one where with elbows, if you guys, I don't know, when you say into your sides, I think like, oh, you want me to bring them in? This is where my sides
I
are.
guess my
Or do you mean
So,
lower them
teacher,
down to your sides?
Did you see her moving generally in the right direction?
I did.
Yeah.
So I guess I was confused too because I was like this, and maybe I misinterpreted. I thought I said bend, and maybe I said that. Or
No, you said wrap your hips
Forward.
and then bend your elbows into the sides.
Okay, so when it says sides, I guess in is probably where I'm confused, because when you guys, and this is multiple, this isn't just, when you say bring your elbows into your sides, I'm like, okay, my sides are here, my elbows are out here, you want me to bring them in. If you want me to bend them down or lower them, that's different for me from bringing in.
So you're rotating your elbows there.
Yeah, in
Because you're
means
thinking-
you're thinking bring them in.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you guys say in, I'm thinking in,
You're
whereas
ready.
this is a different, like the lowering down to me is a different motion than going in.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's
What if
correct
you
or
say
not.
push your elbows into your sides?
So
No,
let's
that's
have
still- So like the pushing into your sides to me, that's still like, I'm going in, like I'm in my sides before.
This is a really good moment to focus on. She did do it correctly. She was, so we as teachers say, oh, we got her going in the right direction. And a lot of times people are quite disconnected from their body and they don't know left from right, right? So she is going, we're getting there, Carla. So she is going in the right direction. However, it's important for her to be able to use this in an ongoing fashion. So if you are explaining that you don't understand how to replicate that, then I think that it would be helpful to think about that into how we cue, to make sure that, yes, she's doing it the right way, but it's attached to you saying it in a certain way that isn't actually registering. Missy, can you
I guess this is an issue where purpose is important for me,
Yeah.
and like, what do you guys want me to do when you say bring your elbows in? Because I'm always just gonna like, I'm bringing my elbows in. This is me bringing my elbows in here. If you want me to bend my elbows, then that is different than bringing in, for me, receiving feedback. So if the intention is to get me to lower down, I need to hear the word lower. I need to hear the direction.
I just feel like that's a hard cue using bend and lower your elbows or lower your elbows. So I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how I would say that correctly, so I'm not also letting you dump your shoulders to the floor. And that's why I think like wrap or bend your elbows into your sides. I'm thinking, okay, you're gonna bring your elbows kind of like almost into your hip crease, is what I'm thinking in my mind. And I'm trying to figure out where the disconnect is to bring that into,
Yeah. So no, it got her in the right position.
So you still want me to bring my elbows like this in, though, right?
So this is a point where we would back up, and this is, I hope you guys have seen this demonstrated in my teaching in the morning. If I'm looking around and the class is falling off left, right, and center, okay, back up, watch me, now let's do it together. So go through it once visually, and that wasn't an option now, but you did get her going in the right direction. So the physical firing is there. Now she needs the next step of being able to understand how to be able to continue to replicate that correct movement. So I would suggest, if this happens to you, which it does, you guys see it as the cues, it's right, but they're confused. So it's not unable, it's unknowing, which is a weird order of operations there. But it does happen with us because the body sometimes is more capable than it realizes. Then go back and have them demonstrate so they see it, because they are doing it right. She's doing it right. But you just don't know what the hell's going on.
It's powerful too if you, instead of you demonstrating, you take a student in the class and demonstrate with them. Let the rest of the class see it.
I just think that for her, just making sure that she sees it on a third person rather than staying with that space of not really knowing what's going
Well, you
on.
can kind of point out things when you're doing it, you can't,
Yeah,
So
but you did go in the right direction.
and you choose a student that was generally has figured it out, so.
Okay. Cool. You guys are getting it. You guys are understanding how to cue in a succinct way and how to give positive feedback. Let's keep going. Carla? I'll smile back.
Okay, come to knee plank. That's not a cue though, right?
No, that's just the starting position.
Roll the weight from your pinky finger towards the knuckle of your middle finger. Press your hips forward. Bend your elbows towards your ribs at a 90-degree angle.
Nice use of prepositions, though.
Yeah.
5 breaths.
Great job bending your elbows into your rib cage.
2, 1. Exhale, release. Okay.
That
So-
little, like a looping. How do you do that too?
So let's back up. What is our objective here? My objective for you in this moment, making sure that she is safe. Okay? I'm having you make her hold it to see if it's sustainable. If it's not sustainable, it's probably not safe. Missy, how did it feel?
Hard.
Okay. So
Like I can feel my shoulders hunching up to my neck.
you can feel yourself, you can feel the posture getting away from you.
Yeah. I guess that's just where I don't know, like, how do I make that different? You know, where do I,
Now, how do we?
what do I do to adjust that either before or within? Like, what's that starting to happen?
You're like starting to following.
Objective. Why do we want them to bend their elbows? No, it's pretty safe. What is the purpose of doing that within the posture? What does that do?
It's strength, right? And so that's why you say you can keep them straight if that's what you can maintain.
So it's separating that. This is how the posture looks, but understanding how to get them there is a different process.
Instead of saying bend the elbows,
She doesn't need to bend her elbows today.
this say.
You're
Okay,
just for today. This is good for you. The most dickish expression for you. Okay, so separating that, being inside of her experience. It's not important for her to bend her elbows. In terms of calibrating her strength, enough is happening in straight arms with bent knees before we're ready to move forward, before we're ready to progress. So that would be appropriate to regress at that point. Okay. Where are we zigging and zagging? Here. Okay. I see 2 more. 2 more.
I'm not gonna make it, obviously. So come into me. Press into your knuckles, and good. And then round your spine. Look forward to the top of your mat.
5 breaths.
5 breaths.
One piece of positive feedback.
Try keeping your spine rounded. And the pressure into your hands.
Last breath. Exhale, release.
That was 5 yoga breaths.
5
I
yoga
know.
breaths. No, yeah, it's like not 5 pacer breaths on the trail. Okay. So this was a sustainable position. Be careful of the verbal tick of good, right? Good. And then that you could have led that into something, but attach it to something meaningful. Okay. The setup was great. She's safe. It's sustainable. Based on the breath, it seems like it's an appropriate place for her to be working. I can hear a little bit of a challenge, but not too much. You know, okay. Heather?
Am I cheating if I go?
No, use your space. It's your,
Turn it into anything. Push your palms down into the mat. Bring your hips forward. Make a turtle shell with your back. Your seems like a cheek.
Okay, that's 3. 5 breaths. One piece of positive feedback.
Nice job keeping your back safe. Just leave it.
Okay, release. Okay. Good setup. You could see her responding in real time. Safe.
You know what I meant? I know.
Not really transferable.
No, it wasn't.
And the other thing is, it's super important that we attach the feedback to something specific, because if we just like, if we said something like, good job engaging your core, you know, whatever their squeezing was, then they would do that every posture. That's not appropriate to do every posture, right? So making sure that they are in a specific mode of operation that they can then transfer.
So, so I gave her feedback immediately. Doing good job, Commissioner. So, is it better to do it right at that moment when it happens?
If you see it, yeah, like if you see that they're making that transition, sure, yeah. Oh, good, because then you see that they're attaching it to that meaning.
And then it reinforces for me, oh, I'm gonna keep doing that. I'm not gonna, if I did a good job with it.
When I really see people respond to me like that, I just get so excited.
It's working.
One time I said, I'm clap.
You too, if you're not doing it, you say good job.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like when I'm in yoga classes with Mindy and I hear her give that feedback, like generally to the class, and it makes me do it. If I'm not already.
You could have said, great job lifting your ribs.
Yes, and yeah, if
For psychology, right?
maybe, yeah, and then it encourages her to go. Trying to hack the system here, Carla. Okay.
Well,
Dios
and it's a
mío.
good time to, whatever vocabulary you want them to know, reinforcing that vocabulary, like as you see them doing it, so then they're attaching your specific class vocabulary to the body movement with the positive reinforcements, so it's all connecting.
Questions for Missy? Questions for me about this practice of feedback? It's so powerful. I say this every time. It just completely transformed my teaching. It just really got me to understand how to be student focused, right? So some of the things I want you to think about when we talk about purpose versus execution, Missy, you can flesh this out a little bit more. I gave you a list of objectives that you can think about when you're teaching. My biggest one is this first one is because it's the most obvious, and then the second one, I'm sorry, page 26. So things I'm looking at from a teaching perspective, can you cue succinctly? I mean, I know when we think about this yoga practice of moving from external to internal, if you've got somebody that's cueing nonstop, it keeps you out here, just with that stimulus. So when you are able to speak with brevity, when you're able to speak succinctly, it gives them space in order to be in their own experience. So cue succinctly. I still, of course, we all struggle with this. I still struggle with this. Trying to limit to 3 cues. You can't really take in more information than that. Not right now. Over time, it accumulates. 3 cues, action, body part, direction. We're gonna work on.
3 cues, 3 words.
No, per cue. Getting somebody into a posture. Inhale, pull your spine forward. Exhale, look at your belly button. Inhale, pull the shoulders off the neck. And then I try to leave you be. So 3 for 3. We're going to work on this today, identifying compensations with the objective of keeping students safe. So if you can, and then this becomes a little bit progressive, if you can identify those compensations, number one, how are you making those poses accessible with props? How are you making these poses accessible with progressions and regressions? Can you correct using empowering language, what we just practiced? Okay. And then in terms of reaching our objectives as teachers, I can do this thing demonstrating it in this way. Well, I think we've done most of this, but if there's anything else that you want to expand on this.
So yeah, on page 27 with the mastery process and making progress, finding out where that breakdown is. I think the regression part of that is so important for meeting your students who are either unable or unknowing, so that you can work back with them. It's satisfying as a student, even if I'm not reaching the full expression of the posture, if I can have success at like a regressed version of it and at least feel successful with that. Like when she was talking about like me bending my elbows is not gonna happen today, but like I can get up to that, you know, all the pre-work before that, and start to do a good job of it. The revision in real time, it's so important if you can record yourself and watch yourself giving feedback, and incorporate that self-reflection, because a lot of times what we think we say in the moment is very different from what we're actually saying, like the difference between push and wrap or things like that, because in our head we're like, especially the more we've said something, you know, sometimes we're slipping on that, and so then seeing the impact that our words have on the actual students and being able to go back and see those moments and then reflect and revise, oh, if I wanted this to happen, what's a more succinct or specific way I could get that to happen? Or what consistent use, if you're recording an entire class, like are there some specific vocabulary, words, or verbs that you're using that are leading to confusion across multiple postures that either need to be changed or need to be explained in depth? So yeah, I can't stress enough the recording and watching yourself and your impact on your students. And then the real-time stuff too, like what you said earlier, about giving that feedback as they're doing the posture at the moment that it's happening, so that they internalize what they're doing well with what they're doing in that moment, and that, you know, you don't have to wait until the end to give feedback. That's a big mistake that we make in the teaching world, is giving feedback after something's done. Well, like that's when it's the least helpful. They're done. You know, you need to like I have a lot of English teachers that I work with and I give workshops, and they're like frustrated, like, oh, I hand these papers back and the kids don't even read the comments. It's like, well, why would they? They're done with that paper. It's more helpful in the rough draft phase when they're working on it. That's where feedback needs to happen, when you're in the moment doing the thing. That's where feedback is going to have the most impact, not when it's done and you're out of it.
The notice and name thing goes along with the I can statements of, setting both I can statements for ourselves as teachers, but also for our students and dealing with a purpose. The I can statement is just so that you're able to evaluate it. Like, are you actually asking them to do something specific, and can they actually do that thing that you're asking them to do? So that's just a way to evaluate, like, if that statement can't be true, if the I can statement, so what would your I can statement be for me in this pose, my version of it or whatever?
My objective for you in that moment. I can sustain the position for 5 breaths.
Okay, and then like detailing that position of whatever it is that you want for 5 breaths. And so then evaluating it, I can't because I don't understand what you want me to do and I need to know more of what I'm gonna do. I think that's part of the elbow factor of like what we were getting in that. Or I can't, sometimes I can't because it's too hard, and yoga breaths, that's not real counting. It's too long. It's how I feel.
And some people, that's a thing. It's like their mind doesn't have that patience for 30 seconds.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, what's the spot, or I run a lot, so my breath is very different from a yoga breath when I'm running. I'm not taking those kind of breaths, and so, that may be something even like if I remember the first time Mindy counted out for me and it was like, this is not 5, and so that's an example that I would have needed ahead of time. So if you tell me, yeah, I can hold this for 5 breaths, not her 5 breaths, and so, that's an important part of the execution of that. It's like, can I hold this for 5 breaths? Well,
and that's the unknowing part. She doesn't know what 5 yoga breaths are.
You got to take me through 5 yoga breaths. And then there are some postures I'll say like, no, maybe 3, like the negotiation of like that. And is it that I'm unable or unwilling to, trying to get, students to do the work, it's not all up to you. This is, student-centered learning that they need to be part of it. So like if you're trying to figure out that assessment of unknowing, unable, or unwilling, get that information from them. Like a lot of times, I guess, and I'm sure you hear typical things like, well, I can't do that because it hurts. Okay, well, like, where does it hurt? Or what hurts, assessing those types of things to see, is it an unable, like an injury issue, or is it an unwilling because of discomfort, like minor discomfort issue? So that they can clearly articulate the specifics of what's going on so that your feedback isn't just general, do this instead, that it's actually addressing the specific issue that student's having. But getting them to articulate it themselves as much as possible so that you're not just like putting the words in their mouth based on assumptions doing. And then, because that also forces them to think about body awareness, what they're doing, how you guys can
Gives
work
them
together.
their ownership over it.
Yeah, it's empowering to have them break that down, because even if it ends up being an unable thing where their body's just not capable of doing that right now, then it's still the ownership of like they've learned something about their body and then how to like build up to that, or like where to regress back to eventually get there. You've still given them feedback and had them articulate their needs or limitations to the point where they have control over that, instead of you're just you're not there to give them a diagnosis.
That's the hit list. Questions about this? We'll get more practice. We're going to go through the act of breaking the postures down and looking at them and examining and cueing in the next section. So, okay. Thank you, Missy. Great work. Great, super duper hard work. You've done good. Let's take 5 minutes. Quickly, if you need hot water, I'm going to go fill up because I brought some smoothie and some oranges and stuff. And there is the hot water thing in the other room, but they start class at noon, so. I'd say. I'll live till. It was like the people in the hallway that I was trying to go back and they're like, hi, how's it going? What are you doing? Can I go back to class now? Come say hi to Andrea with me.
Oh, she's here?
Yeah.
She's in the other room?
In the other room.
I was like, I was gonna go down there, but I just have lots of energy right now.
What are they doing?
Just getting water,
Oh.
hot water.
Hot water? I don't know where you put hot water. There's some bugs down there.
Oh, for tea?
There's some different teas.
There's some hot water. I'm trying
Okay.
to heat up. See if
Um,
it works. Man,
That's a good idea. Maybe I'll just, hey, how are you? Good, good to see you. Oh, you too. How's it going so far? Good, doing good.
Oh, awesome.
your schedule and see. It's like road trip. Yeah. She's like out of there. Morning. I wasn't. Oh, she's not right away. Not till the morning. So she'll sleep at her. Actually, busy. Oh. How about getting until then? Class. Well, thanks. Yeah, it's kind of like,
Yeah, that's a different room.
Guys, to help you, I did afterwards, let me throw that one amount. Step on my thigh and step on my chest.
I eat like 3 at a time.
I know he did, he brought it up. It's like, it's just,
I eat all.
like, don't worry, I will fulfill my debt.
I said 6, limited to 6 people, I don't know.
But I mean, just to buy those things, how many should we buy? Just
Oh,
to
yeah.
have them, the age of 16 old, and then eat.
And these are.
I'm sorry for me, and like a long lunch or anything where I'm trying to open up my desk, it's so like.
Yeah. Probably going to.
And then,
I have none.
it's the one that I have.
They're all
It's like dry. It's kind of bone.
Kind of tastes the same.
I didn't even have any class.
My boyfriend. Okay, I seriously need to spend more time with this. So, I have a table now. This is what confuses me because I don't know my body very well. This is our tailbone, right? Oh, this is our tailbone. Aha. See, I don't know.
You know, that's lots of times yoga instructors use those words and you don't know what they are. So you have to make sure, you know, this is what it is.
I'm always thinking this is the, I don't know. I need to take the I never remember this. I think this. I'm like, what do you want me to do with this? So I'm moving this up and down. Yes.
What she says, bring your elbows straight down.
That makes
I mean,
me shout.
I always say to people in my class. Should I put you in your
That's my biggest problem. That I probably need to take another. I didn't take it. I didn't take it. So I hear these things and I learn them.
Well, I flunked my anatomy test in biology
Did you?
in high school because, you know, there are all these bones and everything. And I thought the instructor was kidding. No, I just didn't try. No, we really needed to know this. It's in there. It's in there.
So, not in
Allie,
the.
there, it's straight ahead. To the right.
No, I've done it in the name of class. Before. I just
Yeah.
really think it would help. You know what I mean? I may just do it.
No, I wondered if
So
it's
like,
like,
it's just like,
That would be helpful.
it's heading that way. Time to adjust before
So like, I was trying to like, I was like,
Well, I kind of like tried to open it and so.
there's no way that's.
So very excited about shoulder cap. Yeah, over here, right? Yeah.
So when she says
A good spirit.
she is, she's still on it.
Yeah.
Like even if you don't like.
I always assumed it's here.
So if you're putting the block under your shoulders when you're laying on your back, where you put.
Oh, that here.
No, because I was like. Am I putting it under my shoulders or under my shoulders?
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense.
Thanks, girl.
Look at the meat. And then you decide where you want to eat. Unless you want me to.
How was the food?
Oh.
You know what I found is, like looking through this book and thinking about,
Yeah.
you know, her approach, she's saying, what's the contraindication and all that. Yoga journal is a good source for
Yeah.
Google the postures, it's got those. Because I need more information about yoga.
That was really bad.
Yeah.
We have one long day.
Can we go?
Oh, yeah. I did.
The sun's out, now this part, it should be nice.
Our guns were out.
Okay, this is one little secret.
Do you wanna?
I don't, this is so bad. I was a history major, so I don't remember.
Obviously, I'll drive 2 hours.
I know this is recorded, but I forget this is the same one. Seriously, so
What do you think? What do you think?
I thought it was like the whole thing. Like,
But see, that's what, like, when people say tailbone too, I just think
This whole
butt.
area. I didn't, you know, I thought like maybe this. Yes, it's.
Yeah, there's no nuance in my knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, so that's part of the reason, yeah.
Well, good that could.
I know, she's like, there it is.
We coordinated. Look at
We
that.
didn't know.
Yin and yang. You smell so hard, you can't see your eyes.
You're more Asian than
I know, it's always been a problem.
You guys are so cute.
It's
Thank
always
you.
been an issue.
Okay, thank you, Missy. Get out of here. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Hot water's cooking back here. Hope
So
you're
when did you
set.
drive over?
This morning, because we had like random winter weather
I was gonna
yesterday.
say,
That's what, I was gonna come last night and I was like, Mindy, I'm not
No.
leaving my house
No.
because it rained, then it started to ice, and then it snowed, and then it iced, and
Right,
I'm up in northern Iowa, so Clarion, like, if you drew a line between Fort Dodge and Mason City, Clarion would kind of hit the middle.